Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weird World podcast. I'm Carrie.
I'm Dean.
And this is going to be part 2 of Dean's murder saga.
The Lake Annecy killings, or Annecy killings in France in 2012, that again, as we tease, remain unsolved to this day. I'll give you a super quick recap. We talked about in part 1 the al-Hilli's, a family originally from Iraq.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Content warning.
Yes.
And maybe if you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to that. You'll be super confused.
For sure. But yes, but if you kind of hazily remember and you listened to already, this is the quick recap. The al-Hilli's took a trip to France to go caravanning. This is September of 2012. They are taking a drive up the scenic Molliere road into the forest there south of Lake Annecy. And they get to this turnout kind of a thing, and they stop to look at the map for some trails. They're going to go for a nice little forest walk with the family. It's father, a mother-in-law, and two little girls, ages 7 and 4, Zainab and Zina. And so we cut, and cyclist Brett Martin, a English person but living in France, goes later on, probably just minutes later, he also rides up into this Les Martinets, the roundout that serves as where this public road ends, and you can go hiking from there. He sees this horrific scene. Here's where the content warning comes in. The entire al-Hilli family, he finds them dead. He also finds a cyclist named Sylvain Molliere, shot 7 times as well. They've been just over 21 shots were fired in total. And it's a horrific scene. He flees. He finds little 7-year-old Zainab alive, though, thank God. And so he has to leave her to go get help, and he does. And the police come and they start investigating the killings. They go back to the campground where the family had been staying, and they hear about a second little girl playing with another little girl. And they freak out. They rush back. This is hours. I think something like 8 or 9 hours after they had originally found the whole family killed, they think, in the car with Zainab just lying unconscious just outside the car. They find a little 4-year-old Zina hiding under her mother's skirts, alive and well, in the back of that horror show BMW.
Yep.
Yeah. We also kind of 2 things to remember we talked about so far, because we're going to start with the investigation now, but there's a couple of key points. One was that the murder weapon was a very old gun made in 1935, a Luger, so it's almost a relic. And 2, that there was this mysterious motorcyclist dressed all in black with a black helmet who had been told by forest workers to stop going down the forest road on the other side of this turnout where the al-Hillis were killed. And that's it. So right away, when the forest workers tell the police about that, a lot of people think that's your killer on a motorcycle. Right. That catches us up.
They're always dressed all in black on a motorcycle.
You're damn right they are. So the investigation starts. It's headed up by regional authorities, the Section des Recherches de Savoie.
Sure.
Destroyed that. It's the Criminal Investigation Department of the French state of Savoie. They were assisted by the Institut des Recherches Criminelles de la Gendarmerie Nationale. I just want to do a terrible French accent. That's the basically the national police unit, kind of a forensic unit of the national police force. France is a much more centralized country than they are. They have a lot of national. The police, aren't just always local city police kind of a thing. So by the end of the month, September, by the way, less than a month later, the British authorities were asked to join the investigation because the victims, the al-Hillis, were British citizens. And so they join and kind of form a joint task force under something called Eurojust. It's an organ of the European Union that seeks to encourage and coordinate cooperation between judicial and investigatory authorities from member European nations. So I've never heard of it. But now I have. So it's not Interpol.
Yeah.
But it's more of a coordinated too. So they formed this kind of joint British-French task force. But the murders took place in France, and the French kind of led the way. The British, though, were helping with the investigations in England, which we'll see here in a minute. So the authorities began by just kind of canvassing the Chevaline, the little town where the al-Hillis were staying in the campground, and they'd been staying there. They questioned every single one of the 70 households in Little Chevaline, exhaustively trying to, what do you know? What did you see? Etc.
Wow.
Nothing really gets developed from this because they're just there for the night before. They had been staying at a different campground before that for a couple of days. Though nothing was developed from speaking to these villagers, the authorities did get a pretty big potential break when they questioned 3 forestry workers who were working in the area, right up there near Les Montagnais, or actually on the other side of the mountain. One of those forestry workers saw a motorcycle parked at the clearing at Les Montagnais as he drove out from the forest road onto the public part of the Molliere. So think like, I don't remember if it's north or south, whatever, but the forest road is on one side, Les Montagnais is kind of on a ridge, and that's the end of the public part. If you keep going, if you're coming from the forest road and keep going, you're now in the public part, or vice versa. Right. Okay. And I alluded in the first part a little bit to this Mr. Motorcyclist. Well, here's where it comes in to the story. So the one forestry worker, he notices that motorcyclist, and he just remembered because he keeps driving down the Molliere, right? And as he's driving down the road, he is passed by a BMW that he described as metallic gray. So elsewhere, the al-Hilli's car is said to have been maroon. I've noticed, so I don't know. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't know if but his description is makes it very clear this was the al-Hilli's driving up Molliere before they had arrived at Les Montagnais to be murdered. Okay. Because he said the driver of the car was on the right-hand side. It was a British car.
Right. Yep.
So he described him pretty well. He remembered that he also remembered it because he thought the car was going too fast. It's a very narrow road, and there's not a lot of room. I've been on Google Maps and driven through it. It's not a lot of room for 2 cars to go in the opposite direction. So he kind of remembered it. So we now know that he saw the al-Hilli's coming up toward Les Montagnais almost certainly minutes before they were murdered.
Wow.
About 10 or so minutes, we think, after this, 2 other forestry personnel were driving on the other side of the Les Montagnais in the restricted part of the road, and they see a person on a black motorcycle approaching them, again, on the restricted road. So they wave him down, and the forestry workers tell him, you can't be on here. It's not a public road. The rider of the motorcycle lifted his visor to listen to the workers, and that's when the workers noticed something that's kind of unusual. He didn't really lift the visor. He swung it. It was hinged on the side, so he swung it away from his face as if it's designed, I guess, for that. But anyway, it was usual to them because usually visors go up and they're hinged at the top. But so they remembered for that reason. And they saw his face. He was a white male. He had a goatee, and they described him as having a, quote, heavy brow. So that's this motorcycle rider. They just go on. They never speak. He never speaks. I don't know if he just grunted or nodded or whatever, but the motorcyclist didn't speak to them. They said, you got to turn back and go. And they kept going and left. So they are also going to pass through the Les Montagnais clear out. And it appears that they drove off without confirming that the motorcyclist really did leave or not. So we just don't know. And in fact, and likely he did not, at least not right away. So anyway, so the timeline of the sequence get kind of weird now. It gets a little bit muddled. But remember Brett Martin, he's the English cyclist who discovered the bodies. Right. He remembers seeing the motorcyclist coming down the Molliere as he rode up. He also has this vague recollection of the BMW having passed him, but he's not sure when. It's not sure perfectly. But he has a better recollection of he did see he thought he saw a black motorcyclist coming down. So before he discovered the bodies. But we just don't know. That could have been because the motorcyclist was coming after freshly killing them, or it could have been that he passed them up before. Because remember, he's on a cycle, so he's going much, much slower than the al-Hilli's and the BMW would have gone. Yeah. So it's a mystery. We don't know at this point whether that motorcyclist is an assassin on a great little quick getaway motorcycle, or if it's just somebody on a motorcycle. Right. But he almost certainly he did come down the public way. Keep that in mind when we think about him.
Well, because that's the thing. If he's not the killer, then the killer didn't come down the public way. Correct. He would have taken the restricted road.
Which again, we say is not impossible, but it's rough. You're going to muck up your car in all likelihood if it's like a sedan, unless it's a 4-wheel drive, but it's not impossible to do. Could
somebody have gotten like out on foot and through the woods or whatever to another road?
Theoretically, if they parked the car or something like that, I mean, who knows? Theoretically.
But then how? Sure. They would have to be set up. He'd have to know they were going to be
absolutely.
there.
You'd have to know at that point.
Yeah,
that seems to me
silly.
Much less likely.
Yeah.
So that, like I say, the sequence and the timing are a little bit muddled, but it's not completely unclear. It seems though to imply that the motorcyclist did indeed turn back though. Sometime after they left, he waited. Whatever he was doing, he waited a little bit because they didn't see him. He didn't pass up the forest workers. But not too long after they told him to leave, he did. Whether or not he stuck around Les Martinets long enough to kill the al-Hillis, we'll think about that later.
Yeah.
So regardless, this confirms that Brett Martin arrived at most just a few minutes after the murders had taken place. So if the murders did take place, it's not the motorcyclist. The murderer pretty much had to be there because nobody else passed Brett Martin. So the murderer kind of had to be there already, or was someone else coming up from the restricted road, and the forestry workers, he was behind the forestry workers who had told the motorcyclist to leave. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's a couple of possibilities. We're narrowing things down, I think. So Brett Martin, as we talked about, didn't hear any gunshots, but there was that pretty loud rushing stream, the Deer River or stream, whatever, that, there were some bridges, you go right over it, and it's pretty loud, so it's possible he could have not heard the gunshots, even if he was fairly close to the turnout where they were murdered. A local man and his son, however, did hear shots. They heard these gunshots. When they happened, they reported it later to the police. It's not clear from the things I've read whether if they were just out in the forest for whatever reason or if they lived near where that turnout was. Mm-hmm. But regardless, they gave the shots little thought because they just assumed it was local hunters.
Yeah.
Hunting season was coming up soon, so they thought, okay, they're just practicing, maybe shooting targets, or maybe they're getting an early start on the season and actually shooting at animals like deer hunting. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. How close are any people living to this?
Down the Combe Deer, there are some little villages along the road, but I don't think there's no town within at least a couple of miles. Okay, I'm sure, but I don't know if there's little cabins or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think it's not. If there are, there's very, very few. So someone did hear the shot, so we can track that, and that tracks with the timing pretty well. Brett Martin and the 3 French hunters who had gone to call the police, right? Remember that when he met up with them as he fled the scene to get help? Mm-hmm. They went back up. So they called, they found a cell service, they called, they went back up, they continued back to the Les Martinets to await the arrival of the authorities.
Yeah.
They did not see anybody coming down in that trip. So we know that if the murderer did it, they had to melt into the forest or go down the restricted part of it. Either of which is possible.
Yeah.
So
did they see the motorcyclist?
Did I say that? I think so.
Okay.
I think Brett Martin saw the motorcyclist, right?
Yeah, you said Brett Martin did. Okay. But did the people that
I don't know.
He stopped? Because they would have been coming up the mountain. A little bit behind
Brett Martin. Yeah. They might not have. I don't know. I don't know. Or they might not have noticed him.
Okay.
I have not seen that addressed in any of the things I've read.
I mean, it's so easy to just drive and not notice.
For sure.
Who you
Why would you're not thinking about it. Everybody who's passing you. Yeah. Absolutely. So one question right away is, was the killer the motorcyclist? The timing fits with Brett Martin sighting the motorcyclist going past him before he found the bodies and then going down the road after he had found the hunters who called the police. So the motorcyclist, the timing works for the motorcyclist to be the killer. So he could have loitered for a little bit after the forest workers told him to leave. He could have been waiting for his targets. And when they get there, he does the deed. We know that Brett Martin saw that motorcyclist driving down. So the timing does fit to make this mystery motorcyclist, a potential killer. It is pretty bold to do these things in broad daylight and then go down the public road, but he has a helmet on.
Right.
He's on a motorcycle. You're out of there very fast. Motorcycles are. A lot of hits in like South American stuff. There are motorcycles because they can weave through traffic and go and fast and much more maneuverable than if any car is chasing them.
In Europe too, it always seems like there are motorcyclists zipping through.
You can ask why wouldn't he go down the restricted area? Maybe he was scouting it when he was seen by the forestry workers.
Right.
And maybe he just thought, I better not do that. What if there are more forestry workers down there? Who knows? So in that sense, the public road could have seemed almost more safer to him, even though he was chancing being seen by people. But like I said, he would have been hard to identify. But the weird thing about this is that he would have known he could be identified by the forest workers because he showed them his face. So we'll get back to that too. So why move the visor out of the way? He could have just nodded to indicate that he agreed with them and understood. If he's about to commit multiple murders, he'd kind of be pretty stupid to have removed the visor and let them see his face and then go down the public part of the road. So we'll get back to the motorcyclist, but chew on that. Keep that in mind. And since no one else is seen in the area, really, you don't really have any other vehicles that appear to be. There's talk in some of the stuff I read about a mystery four-wheel drive or something like that, but it's not very clear. If it wasn't the motorcyclist, then it had to be someone who's probably traveling on foot through the surrounding forest, or came up and left via the restricted area and just wasn't seen by those forestry workers.
Yeah.
Who knows? Or maybe possibly, I shouldn't say that because it could have been a car and it just wasn't noticed by anyone.
Well,
that's entirely possible.
Yeah.
So who knows? And again, the ability to go down that direction, down the restricted part, is very easy. It's just a sign that tells you not to do. It's not a gate or anything like that. So it's possible. It does indicate local knowledge, though, in all likelihood, though, or at least some research.
Mm-hmm.
So the police did get a sketch of the motorcyclist from the forestry workers, but in their infinite wisdom, they chose to not make it public.
So what's the point?
Yeah, precisely. They would say later that they feared that it would induce the motorcyclist to flee before they can catch him.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, I guess, but yeah, no, it's an absolute blunder for no question whatsoever. I mean, given that they had very little evidence to pursue the investigation, and that rider was a definite suspect, and again, it seems like it would have already known that those forest workers could identify him, so it's not going to make him flee. He's not going to flee if he hasn't flown already. It seems like a really dumb mistake that they did, but they did it.
I mean, law enforcement does it all the time.
They always do. That's the reason you get a sketch.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
I don't know.
That's weird.
It is possible, too. Some people say that it was maybe a motivated mistake. The French police had already determined in their minds that murder did not originate in France, but it had originated back in England. They felt that the al-Hillis were clearly the targets of the killings, so it must be someone close to them. And they had a prime suspect in their mind pretty early on.
Yeah. Well, I think we all do.
We do, but there actually was another prime suspect very early on that may not be as obvious as the one you're thinking of. And this was a relation to Iqbal, not to Saad. Iqbal had a brother named Haydar Taher, Thaher. I'm totally guessing how that's spelled, and who knows? It could be wrongly spelled on every single source. He was a 46-year-old. He had been living with his parents back in Stockholm. He was also mentally ill, and the family believed that he was schizophrenic. He was seeing therapists and psychiatrists. He was pretty seriously damaged. The main manifestation of this mental illness, though, was being pretty violent and aggressive and having a huge temper. He almost routinely attacked and beat his mother, Suhaila, in their home. They lived in a suburb south of Stockholm. And he would beat her pretty routinely. So It was very sad. In fact, the police have been called 8 times to the home from 2001 to 2007. A Swedish court document said that Haydar had repeatedly, quote, insulted, threatened, and beaten his parents over a very long time. So I hope something be done about that, but apparently nothing was, and he continued to live with them. And I don't know if this is why Suhaila had gone to live with her or to stay with the other daughter who lived about an hour away from Iqbal in England. I don't know if it's because she's terrified with Haydar, because Haydar was in England as well. And if he wasn't staying with his parents, I don't know who he's staying with. So it's not clear.
Oh.
Yeah. So the police initially they're thinking, okay, did Haydar do it? What did he travel? Did he, for some reason go to kill his sister or something like that? Who knows? Maybe he had found out there, or to kill his mother because he had found out about the trip and he followed her to France. It seems a little weird, but they did hone in on him in the immediate time. But they then found out that he had been receiving mental health treatment in England and had a certain alibi for that. When the murders occurred, he was under care.
Okay.
So it wasn't him. So France, though, especially the French investigators, start to zero in on who they think did it. The British tabloids are having a field day with this. They're thinking, remember Saad worked with satellites and engineer. He was for a technology company. He worked for that company, not as an employee, as a contractor. But they still thought, is there some kind of an espionage angle? Is he selling secrets or something like that?
Yeah.
So the French investigators, after they pivoted off of Haydar, they started looking into that angle as well. The French lead prosecutor, Eric Maillard, publicly stated that the motive originated in England, though. So he's effectively, pretty obviously, casting his shade onto Saad. al-Hilli, the brother of Saad.
Yeah, that was mine.
Yes. The French zero in on him quickly. They uncover that really thorny relationship between two of the brothers. They remember when they first talked to Saad, Said, he said, no, we get along fine. And they would find out later that's absolutely not true. They learned of a letter from Saad to a friend not long after their father's death. And the letter said that he was no longer speaking to his brother. And he said he was like a control freak and kind of intimated that he was corrupt. He was shady. He was doing some really shady things.
The brother?
The brother was. Okay. Saad thought his brother Saad was shady.
Okay.
And was trying to take control of the father's assets illegally and wrongly. He's trying to, gain control of different properties and potentially a lot of money he had in Swiss banks. He said he was sad about this brokenness of their relationship, but he just wanted to just move on and just focus on his family and forget all about his brother. Remember, he had kicked him out of the house and changed the locks as well. Mm-hmm. So apparently, not knowing that the French knew this, as I mentioned, Saad just denied it, and they confronted him with this untruth, and it just cast more suspicion in their minds on Saad as being the killer. In October of 2011, not long after their father died, and they're already fighting over his property and stuff like that, the two brothers had actually come to blows. They had an actual fist fight at the house, I believe the house in Claygate, and the police were called in. Yeah. And it was not long after that Saad had forced his brother to leave and changed the locks, and also thought he had stolen some things too. So Saad also had the accounts of his father frozen, because he thought that there's a good chance that Saad was going to try to steal the money from his father's accounts. According to one friend, Saad thought that Saad had also committed tax evasion and fraud. So Saad has an alibi, though, for the day of the murders.
Well, sure.
Yes. So the French police immediately thought, fine, then you hired a hitman.
Exactly.
Which makes it weird that they wouldn't want to, the motorcyclist has to be the hitman in their mind. So it's weird that they weren't trying harder. I mean, a hitman's not going to hang around. So just release the thing and see if anybody noticed him doing anything at all. It's weird. And of course, his motive was to gain the family's finances were substantial, and Saad needed the money. He clearly has a motive.
Yeah.
There's no question. I'll say that right now, today, as of 2025, Saad for sure had a motive. The best evidence that he may have been involved in it was that, and I think we'll go into that later.
And his motive to kill his brother extends to the sister-in-law and the kids.
For sure, yeah.
Because
and the mother is just there accidentally, and Sylvain Molliere is there accidentally, and they're just collateral damage. Also, the French police thought that the killing seemed like it was professional. There's no fingerprints, no DNA left behind. They thought about the kill shots to the forehead. They surmised that the way it was, he shot down that to them that indicated there was some kind of professional training or some kind of elite training. Trust me, we'll go into that later.
Yeah.
But they were convinced it was a professional hit. I have a whole section on if it was a professional hit or not. We'll talk later a little more depth about whether it was a professional hit or not. But there are some problems that I just allude to them real quickly right now. That if the murderer was not the motorcyclist, no other vehicle was seen that we know of. And a professional killer from out of the area is almost certainly going to have to take that public route to, or at least two, if not two, and away from. The weapon was weird. The Luger P06 from 1935. I mean, that seems weird unless he decided to get the gun when he got there.
Yeah, because that is weird.
There were 30,000 of them in the area because the Swiss Army had to use them. So there was
30,000?
30,000 of them. Yeah, of Lugers, not that specific. They'll later find out exactly what kind of, but there's not as many. But Luger P06s, there were tons of them there. Again, it had been standard issue for a long time. And, how would they know? They wondered how Saad would know that the al-Hillis were going to take a trip and where they were going to go. It was a little bit last minute, and he was on speaking terms with his brother. So how would his brother know to tell the hitman where to go get them? Well, guess what? The French investigators discovered that Suhaila's laptop had been implanted with spyware. She's the mother of Iqbal. And not long after the shootings, her home back in Stockholm area was broken into and ransacked, and personal documents were stolen. So now they're thinking, okay, that puts Saad in the frame. That's how he found out. Through whatever emails or something or the like, he found out through spying on Suhaila's laptop where they're going and when they were going. And that, and then maybe the hitman, shortly after committing the deeds, went to her house, Suheila's house, in the hopes of finding documents that I don't know what, nobody knows what, but something like maybe she had some of the banking documents or something like that.
Why would she?
Why would she?
That's
Absolutely,
weird.
I know. To me, the break-in reeks of pure coincidence.
But also, she didn't live in England.
No.
She didn't live with them.
I know.
It's weird that it's her laptop with the spyware.
It is weird. And this is sheer coincidence. She got a bug. She got a malware at some point in her.
I was thinking you were going to say that they discovered, one of those tracking devices on their car or something like that, because it doesn't make sense that they're surveilling the mother-in-law, because how would they know that she would be going with them wherever they were going?
I remember by that time she's in England.
Yeah.
Unless they'd had it on there a long time.
Yeah.
And the fact that the trip to France was somewhat last minute negates that.
Yeah.
But the French investigators jumped on it, and that to them, that made them much more suspicious, even more so, of Saad.
Yeah.
That here's how you found out those things you said you wouldn't have known. Like, I'm sure he's saying, well, how would I know? And they're saying, here's how you knew.
Well, they'd have to prove that it came from
They
him.
for sure would,
and that'd be difficult.
But then things did get a little shadier. So they learned that part of the location Saad had chosen was because he wanted to drive over to Geneva, which is not far at all from Lake Annecy, and he was going there to look into his father's Swiss bank accounts. He had already arranged for a visit and a meeting to meet someone from the bank, a bank representative, to go and talk to them. Interesting. The reason he was doing that, because he was highly suspicious of his brother. And so the investigators started looking into those accounts.
Yeah.
And they discovered that one account that Kadim al-Hilli, the father, had set up in 1988, now had over 1 million euros in it. Mm-hmm. There had been virtually no activity related to this account since it was opened back in 1988, until very recently someone from England had applied for a credit card linked to this account. That was just before Kadim had died, so a little more than a year when the murders took place.
Okay, someone. Oh, okay.
A wary, smart bank employee thought that was odd, and so he checked the signature on the application for the credit card against the original signature for the account holder, and
didn't match.
They did not match. The bank contacted Kadim, and he said, I have not applied for any kind of credit card on that account. Yeah. I know nothing about that. So Swiss authorities looked into it, and they discovered that the applicant for that account was
Saad
al-Hilli.
Yeah.
So he was already trying. So undoubtedly, the Saad had known about this. So he knew
that his brother was
trying to steal some money.
Did he kill their father?
I've never seen that. I don't know. I've never seen that. I've never ever seen a hint of that. So I'm assuming that father died of a natural cause.
Yeah.
He would have been probably in his 70s or something like that. In the wake of the murders, the British television show Panorama uncovered also that Saad had attempted to create a fraudulent will in his father's name.
I mean.
Mm-hmm. He had also tried to withdraw £2 million from another Swiss bank account that the father had. The father had some dough. Some said Kadim's fortune may have been linked to laundering money for Saddam Hussein back when he was in Iraq.
Because I was going to say, what was he selling? Hot dogs?
It was toilet paper and poultry or something like that.
Yeah.
So did he have connection with the former Iraqi dictator? Is he how shady are these people? Yeah. It's just getting really deeper and deeper to the French investigators. And to them, it seems like Saad is very shady. And frankly,
so is Kadim.
He's very, very, they both are. But Saad is really trying to do some shady things. So to me, it sounds like Saad had really good reason to not trust his brother, which in turn means that Saad had pretty good motivation to have Saad killed.
But also, why didn't the father had died like a year earlier? Why didn't they just split the money and part ways?
He wanted more of it. He wanted 75% of the Spanish flat. He wanted to buy him out of the Claygate house. Saad Saad would have said Saad was very greedy.
I know, but just figure it out. Split it. Get on with your lives.
I don't think you understand how greed works, Carrie. You can't just to those people. You can't say let's just be fair.
But courts are involved.
I know, but it was going to be those things can turn long and nasty. Yeah. And so the French investigators would have said Saad wanted all of it, and he'd get it with Saad out of the way, and he didn't want to wait years in court, in which he might and spending a lot of money with lawyers. So he had millions of motivations for killing Saad.
Yeah.
for
sure.
And really the whole family too. That's also another thing that
I know.
The most striking thing about this thing is that they killed an entire family. Whoever this monster was, a whole family. The French investigators thought that Saad had a motivation for making sure they were all killed.
Yeah.
So for his part, Saad, of course, vociferously denied any involvement in his brother's murder. He offered to take a lie detector test. The police, though, kind of thought little of his denials, and they arrested Saad in, I think it was March of 2013. They did let him out on bail, but in the French minds, he remained the absolute prime suspect.
Yeah.
There's another angle here, though, and there are other avenues that they were investigating. In fact, there's really kind of a whole host of alternative kind of theories, even as Saad al-Hilli was squarely in the crosshairs of the French investigators. They were looking at other things, and so were the British as well. So to their credit, they didn't get complete tunnel vision. They didn't stop looking at anything even though they suspected that Saad was the likely perpetrator. The key alternative was centered on, at first at least, not just who did it, but who was the target of the killings. The assumption all along had been, well, it's the al-Hillis. They were almost all of the victims. This cyclist with his bicycle next to the car looked like an obvious wrong place, wrong time, had chanced onto this horrific event. But there were some people who thought that Sylvain Molliere he was actually the target, and the other way around, the al-Hillis were horrific collateral damage.
Yeah.
Much of this came from the British side, by the way, of the investigation. They were the ones who most thought, okay, we're going to flip it. The French say, okay, the murder was in France, but it was essentially originated in England. The British thought the exact opposite. No, they were British. The murder, though, was of that French guy, Molliere, and our British citizens were just happenstance. Yeah. So they thought, okay, no, let's think about this as if Molliere was the target. Now let's look into that. So police did. So the French authorities did, and all the investigators did. They found out he was a very well thought of person. He lived back in Eugene. He had a partner named Claire. I'll have her last name later. They had a new baby. They had two teenage stepchildren Claire had from a previous marriage.
Yeah.
He loved cycling, as you might imagine. He loved challenging mountain routes. He liked to really challenge himself. He worked for a subsidiary of the French nuclear power giant Areva. And this started to raise some eyebrows. Okay, wait a second. He works for a nuclear power company? What's going on here? Could he be selling or have been trying to sell nuclear secrets? And it went bad?
What kind of nuclear power secrets are there?
I mean, the kind that could get you killed. Some people they're thinking, though, but they were thinking, okay, Le Martinet, hey, that sounds like a rendezvous point, Maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe it was planned. He was meeting someone there. Oh, maybe Saad with his satellite technology, they were teaming up. Hey, Saad, I've got nuclear secrets. Saad says, you know what?
I got satellite secrets.
It's like Reese's peanut butter cups. So some people really did legit think there's something going on. Maybe, yes, there's already the idea that Saad was espionage and was selling satellite secrets, which is not ridiculous. But there were people who thought Sylvain Molliere was selling some kind of nuclear secrets. Well, it turns out he was a welder.
Yeah.
At the Eugene facility.
Okay.
So he didn't have any deep nuclear secrets. It's amazing how that stuff lasts more than 30 seconds if police are looking into it. He's a welder? Okay, we're done here. They also could not find a shred of evidence that he and Saad had ever had any contact whatsoever. Of course they not. They probably literally never spoke a word to one another, except possibly in a short period on the clear out at Le Martinet. So that was a false angle. At least that part of thinking. There are lots of people who still think Sylvain Molliere was the target, but no, it wasn't selling secrets. Another possibility that did seem more promising, though, maybe went through Claire, his partner, because she was from a very wealthy family. Following the birth of their new baby together, it was said that she had inherited her parents' very successful pharmacy business, and so she had suddenly come into a bunch of money. Interesting. Investigators found that some members of Claire's family felt that Sylvain was a moocher. He was living off her and living off her money. His parental leave when they had the baby, he had scheduled it to drag on for up to 3 years.
Wow.
Jesus, France. I mean, God. What do we get? 6 weeks? And that it was not for parental leave, is something like that. Were you unpaid? Isn't it 6 weeks?
You can take family leave up to 3 months.
3 months, okay,
yeah.
not 3 years,
not paid,
but not paid. Yeah, I don't know if he's being paid or not. I don't. Apparently, it sounds like he was not.
Yeah,
because he's going to live off her for 3 years as he took parental leave.
Yeah,
So there was said to be growing tension within Claire's family, and they found out that it was Claire's father who has suggested the cycling route to Sylvain. So he's at a whatever family dinner, and he's hey, it's got good routes. And Claire's father said, yeah, I know a really good one. You go to this cleric called Le Martinet, It's up to Combe d'Ir. So that meant that Sylvain's father-in-law would have known
and hired a hit,
and he could have hired a hitman. So he knows where he's going to be. He hires the killer. He has someone waiting for him, maybe on a black motorcycle, maybe not.
Yeah,
and he gets rid of this nuisance quasi son-in-law who is gaining access to all this pharmacy company that this man had built all his life, and was now pissed off that this moocher was going to take that from him. The police did inspect this lead. They took it seriously, but it fell apart pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The family fortune, it turns out, wasn't all that much. They weren't that rich.
Yeah.
And it turned out that Claire had not inherited and been gifted the business from her father. She had taken out a bank loan and bought it from him, and was in the process of making monthly payments to pay back that bank loan.
I was going to say, if her father's still alive, why is she inheriting anything?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So it sounds like they listened to gossip before they really did the real investigation and got the truth. And the couple were not even married. So in French law, he would not have any legal claim on that business if that was the idea.
Right.
He would not have a legal claim on Claire's money.
Yeah.
So it was just a waste of time. So they think, okay, well, if it still could be Molliere as the target, so what about, hey, how about a jealous lover? Was Sylvain kind of a player? They looked into that. The French prosecutor, though, publicly stated that we've looked into all those kinds of jealousy angles and things like that. We can't find anything. We can't find any jilted lover or anything like that. So parts of the joint investigation, again, mainly in Britain, still clung to the idea that Molliere was the target, and many of them still do to this day. So they thought that, if you get rid of the fake motives, though, this theory is predicated on two things: that Molliere was shot first and he was shot the most. So a lot of people literally, that's the idea. Well, wait, he must have been the target because we think he was shot first and he was shot the most. He was shot 7 times. And that this must mean he was the target. The problem is neither one of those assumptions holds up. Sylvain was shot 7 times. Some sources, by the way, have said 5. The most say 7, so I'm going to go with 7. And so yes, he was shot the most. DCI, Detective Chief Inspector, for people who have watched British mystery shows. Mark Preston, he was the Surrey Police. He was on this joint investigation, and at the time, he's a firm believer in Molliere was the target, and he has stated that, because he was shot first, I think that makes him the target. And also because he was shot the most. So he's stated that kind of a theory that I just summarized pretty boldly and for a long time now, and given a lot of interviews about that. Preston he also defended Saad al-Hilli, and he claimed that later on, I think when he was off the case, he claimed that the French police had almost like they had a bias towards targeting someone in England having done the crime. So he was a little put off by that, apparently, and that this caused them to overlook other lines of investigation, such as Molliere being the target and the killer being somehow connected to Molliere. Again, we've just seen how they did indeed investigate those angles. And he even said, quote, that al-Hilli was killed, quote, to cover and confuse any investigation. So he thinks the al-Hillis were killed after the assassin had killed the target Molliere to, quote, cover and confuse any investigation. I'm just going to state straight up, Mark Preston, I'm sorry, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anything they say.
Yeah.
To cover and confuse. If he just said because they were witnesses and they weren't supposed to be there, fine.
Yeah.
But it's like he makes it, I read a long interview by him, and he makes it into very kind of almost a little conspiracy cover-up-y, and there's just no evidence of that. You could argue that there's some incompetence maybe, but you cannot, there's no evidence that there was anything like that. So the shot the most part theory is just, if I'm being kind, that's just not helpful.
Yeah.
If I'm being unkind, it's also pretty dumb. It implies that if Molliere is the target, you have to shoot the target more times. I don't understand that. And, to me, it's very obvious why he was shot the most. The al-Hilli's car was parked, so Molliere is parked near the car for whatever reason. And Saad and daughter Zainab are going up and looking at the sign, remember? Mm-hmm. And Molliere stopped. Apparently, they think his bike had a loose chain. So they think that he stopped there to fix his bicycle chain before he went on one of the trails, likely one of the challenging mountain trails.
Yeah.
And ballistic evidence indicated that at least the initial shots were shot at him and connected with him when he was bent forward a little bit, indicating he's leaning over to fix his bicycle chain.
Right.
The killer would have needed to dispatch Sylvain first because he was mobile.
Yeah.
He was on a bike. You don't know if his chain is loose or not. So if you go and shoot the family, that cyclist is gone.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to catch him and kill him. And now this person has seen what you're doing and can identify you in all likelihood. So and the reason I would argue he's shoot him a lot because he's at a distance and he's just making sure he knows he has plenty of bullets. Remember, he had at least 3 clips. So he shoots him a lot and he dispatches the person who can most easily escape the scene of the crime.
Right.
So, which it also explains the sequence. If indeed Molliere was shot first, if he was shot first, fine. I just told you why. That doesn't mean he was the target.
Right.
In fact, it's very logical. He's not the target. So I think that's kind of nonsense. There's no, and by the way, there's also no forensic way you can tell if he's shot first.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard that before. And Mark Preston says that like as a fact. Other sources say, but this is disputed. Well, no shit is disputed. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So if in terms of the sequence, it's not completely clear. We'll get to it at the end of my surmise of what happened. But if the initial murder had been committed prior to Molliere getting there, so the sequence of the murder is kind of important because if Molliere gets there and the al-Hillis are dead in front of him, he's gone.
Yeah.
Everybody's dead. His carnage he's out of there. If the al-Hillis get there and they find Molliere lying on the ground, shot 7 times, and the assassin's still there, they don't park and get out of the car and go check out the map. Even if the assassin had already gone back into the forest and heard them arrive and came back and killed them, it doesn't make any sense.
The dad might get out of the car, but they're not letting their 7-year-old get out of the car.
Maybe they check. Once they see that he's been shot 7 times, they are gonzo.
Yeah.
So to me, the only thing that makes sense is that they were there. The two parties arrived. Molliere and the family arrived roughly the same time.
Yeah.
Probably the al-Hillis were a little bit ahead of him, and they stop and he's checking his tire. He's checking his chain while Saad and Zainab are getting out of the car to go check the map. So that's to me, that's the only thing that makes sense. So it does at that point. It makes no sense to say because Molliere was shot first, he was the target.
Yeah,
he wasn't. He was shot first because he was mobile. In a book on the Annecy murder, Saad al-Hilli claims that the investigation was, quote, a cover-up, unquote, designed to hide that Molliere was the intended target and therefore he had no motive for the murder. So he's fully on board with that because that,
of course he is,
puts suspicion away from him. Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder, I don't know if this is true or not, but was Saad the source of the Molliere theory? Because he was talking a lot to the British investigators. I wonder if he suggested that early on. Yeah, I don't know. I have nothing to say.
I mean, it would be a natural thing that they should explore.
I guess.
But
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And what that means. They should explore his background. But like I said, the French did.
Yeah.
And for the British, at least Preston, to say that they didn't is nonsensical. And you wonder, the UK investigators, did they latch onto this because it meant the crime was very French?
Yeah.
I don't know. That seems weird. But people are people. People are people.
Yeah.
Cops are human. And so they could have been put off by the French insisting in their super annoying accent that this all was caused by bad things in England. So who knows? I don't know. Finally, though, remember that the police could find no motive locally for anyone to have wanted to kill Molliere. Then you're left with nothing to back up the Molliere was the target theory. To me, it falls apart completely. There's no,
a welder at a power plant. I mean,
yes, the number of shots and whether he's first, as indicating he was the target, easily disputed, easily knocked away.
Yeah,
and the police could find zero motive for someone wanting to kill. That means that either the al-Hillis were a target or there was no target at all.
Yeah.
So early on, police were pretty stumped. In France, they thought it was Saad. In England, maybe some of them thought that Molliere was the target, so it must have something to do with him. But neither side was really very close to proving their top suspects at all.
Yeah.
The international team, though, was still checking lots of other possibilities, and there were plenty that we haven't talked about yet. So the most obvious was what I kind of alluded to just a minute ago, is maybe there was no target at all.
Random?
This was some psychotic. And all the victims, not just Molliere, but all of them were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And there was kind of some variance to this solution. The most popular was the lone gunman theory. There was the lone gunman theory was propped up a little bit by the weapon. They thought that's not the kind of a weapon a professional hitman would use. So maybe it's some kind of a local who has that gun. They've inherited it, and he's some kind of, somebody looking to kill, a thrill killer or something like that.
You would just think somebody would know. And
why?
Suspect.
No.
My cousin's acting weird. He had one of those guns.
So many people
have
been in plain sight, and no one suspected them for decades of those cases. So no, you could if you keep to yourself and you're smart about it, no one's ever going to know.
That's absolutely huge.
Why? If you don't talk, if you're the only one who did it, you don't talk about it.
What I was going to say is that's a huge thing to be a one-off.
It is.
You tried to kill an entire family plus another person.
That's true.
That's the weird part to me.
Well, okay, people did think it was a serial killer. That is one of the variations on quote unquote lone gunman theory. Yeah. And France did have one of those active in the area at the time. Mm-hmm. And he was looked into. His name was Nordal Lelandais. I'm going to go with Lelandais.
Okay.
Lelandais. He was a 34-year-old ex-soldier. He had been suspected in 2 murders in the area, just a few years after Annecy killings. Mm-hmm. And he was also suspected of maybe being responsible for many more. He was a child molester and a killer. He became a suspect in the disappearance of a young girl in the Chambry region. I should look up how to pronounce these. Chambry. It's a city in Savoie about 50 miles or 80 kilometers south of Lake Annecy. Lelandais was charged with kidnapping and murder. They also thought he very likely killed a fellow ex-soldier, a 25-year-old named Arthur Molliere, who disappeared while hitchhiking in April 2017 in that same area in Chambray. So he was questioned about these murders, and they questioned, and when they caught him those years later, they brought up the Annecy murders, and they looked into that and any angle he might have had or possibility he was involved in those, but they could find no connection whatsoever with this known serial killer. So in early 2013, the investigation's going nowhere. Even the French are ready to look at a suspect that could be tied only to Molliere as a target hypothesis. So they were pretty desperate if they're going to do that. And what happened is they gathered a list of anyone in Molliere's life who could possibly have a motive for murder. Now, they'd already looked at a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago. They'd looked into that, but now it's like, let's reach far and wide. And they did kind of find one. It was a 50-year-old former French Foreign Leggionairre named Patrice Menegaldo. He was now working as a firefighter in Eugene, where Molliere lived. Mm-hmm. Menegaldo had a connection to Molliere. He had dated the sister of Molliere's partner, Claire Schutz, for 7 years. So, seems a little tenuous to me. But the police did question him. That's why they questioned him for about an hour, went over to his house. And what they would say later is that we moved on. We didn't find any link. Okay. We moved on. Not a suspect. So the police were blindsided when a few months later, in 2014, Menegaldo committed suicide. And he left a suicide note. In that note, he said how he was unable to live with himself as a suspect in the horrific Annecy shootings. Police were shocked. They said he had not been a suspect in the killings. They had never really suspected him until now.
Yeah.
Suddenly they did. To many in the investigation, this seemed like a guilty conscience. It's like, okay, we should look at him now. Maybe he is somehow did this with some kind of connection to his not quite brother-in-law, Sylvain Molliere.
Wait, was he a current partner or a former partner of the sister?
I think it was former. So Eric Maillard even said publicly this time, he was the French prosecutor, quote, "The hypothesis at the top of the chain for the investigators is a local killing. We have a real suspect. I'm referring to the Legionnaire from Eugene." So they had switched completely now. Saad al-Hilli and his lawyers, of course, said, yes, that's the guy. Mm-hmm. So they've done a little bit of a 180 now. My suspicion is that was Menegaldo really a suspect all along, and they had told him that, and now maybe they're trying to save face because he committed suicide because you put the pressure on him. I don't know. Pure speculation there. But it did kind of put him right back on the suspect list now after he committed suicide and wrote that note. So they investigated him further, and again, another dead end. They found that he almost certainly killed himself because he had pretty serious mental problems, it turns out. He had what we'd probably now call PTSD, or I even then would have called PTSD, for like the last 20 years. He had been in therapy for a very long time following his service in Legion. And so, they thought, what we just both thought, his connection to Molliere was extremely tenuous. Yeah. So technically, I think he remained a suspect and still is, I guess, technically, but I don't know that any people take that angle very seriously. But who have we forgotten about here, Carrie? The mysterious motorcyclist.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, did he have a motorcycle? Did he have that kind of gun?
No.
Did he
They're still looking for They're still looking for that person with their secret sketch. By November 2013, the police finally realized how dumb it was to not release the sketch of the motorcyclist, and they did so. So this is more than a year after the killings. Okay. They decided, and they had it a day later. Great. Mm-hmm. They had also been attempting to trace all 8,000 of the black motorcycles that were like the model that he had been ridden. I guess the forestry workers could see. We know it had like it was fairly distinctive. It was a big motorcycle. So they were able to figure out what exactly make and model it was. And they're now trying to trace all 8,000 of those in, I guess, the area of France or the whole country. I don't know. They had been checking also into the 4,000 or so mobile phones that had pinged off the nearest tower to Les Martinets on the day of the murders. That's a good idea. They're working these angles assiduously, but it's needle in a haystack kind of a thing. Yeah. These strands, though, led to someone named Eric Devoussou, Devoussous.
No idea.
Devoussou. He was arrested on February 18th, 2014. Why? Because his phone had been one of those 4,000 that had pinged in that area on that fateful day, and he resembled the sketch that the forestry folks had made, and he had some troubles in his past. He was fired from the police force in June of 2013 for misconduct, and what's more, he was said to be a big-time racist, and a lot of folks on the French side thought that maybe the al-Hillis were targeted for being non-white.
Muslim, yeah.
They're Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
They're Arab. So they get a search warrant for both his house and I think his in-laws' house. And guess what they find? It's in that little village called La Tuile. It's just south of Chevaline. So he lived in the area, and they check his house and they find guns.
Yeah.
A lot of guns. One source said he had over 40 weapons in his house. Not a great thing.
But if he had, I'm assuming, up to date.
Well, many of them turned out to be pre-World War II, like the Luger P06. Okay. And that, to them, seemed a connection to that Luger.
Yeah.
Even better, they found ammunition similar to that used for the P06 murder weapon.
Uh-huh.
So this promising avenue, it sounds good. Let's go look at this thing. Now, that's not going to work either. Devoussou was a weapons collector. That's why he had all these old guns and he had that old ammunition. They would find zero connection between him and any of the victims. It was not his DNA that they found on a couple of unidentified samples that were left at the murder scene. Okay. Of course, that could be anybody.
Yes.
It's just a very public turnout. But still, they had a couple of unidentified DNA samples to check just in case it was the murderer, and it wasn't him. And then when the forestry workers got a close look at Devoussou, at his motorcycle. Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention. He also had a black motorcycle.
Okay.
That was one of the things that they traced him by. I think that was the main thing that they traced him by. And so they had the forestry lookers, is this the motorcycle? And they said, you know what? No. Yeah. It's similar, but that's not it.
Okay.
But of course, since he lived in the immediate area, that could explain why his phone pinged. That's not very surprising.
Yeah.
So pretty quickly, this guy also was out of the frame.
Yeah.
But the police were not done with those cell phone records. In 2015, that line led them to a 57-year-old man who lived in Lyon. It's about 90 miles or so, 150 kilometers west of Séville. This unnamed man was the man in black riding the motorcycle at Les Martinets on that awful day back in September of 2012. They had finally found their mystery motorcyclist because they found it through his cell phone pinging off that tower.
Okay.
So they question him and they say, we know you were there on the day of in this immediate area. What's going on? Turns out this unnamed man was an avid paraglider. And he had been for a long time wanting to ride the winds of Lake Annecy. Mm-hmm. So he had ridden out there that day to scout the area. But then when the forestry workers said, you can't go down here, he said, okay. Or he didn't speak to them. He obeyed the law. And he did turn around and leave through the public road, which we know that Brett Martin had seen him do so. If we believe him, he missed the murders by a few minutes or so. But you're probably asking yourself, aren't you? Wait a second.
I'll tell you what I'm asking myself.
What is it? Tell me.
I'm asking myself, this had to have been huge news.
That's exactly it.
Did he not hear about this and then not think, oh my God, what vehicles did I see? Who did I see? I would go straight to the police.
He knew because they didn't do the sketch of the motorcyclist, but they certainly talked about it. It was in the media immediately. So he knew they were looking for this guy dressed in black, riding a big black motorcycle who was at Les Martinets on that day. It was a media sensation, internationally, alone in that area of France. Yes, it's like, what? How have you been? Almost 3 years, you haven't said a word.
Yeah.
And he said, very simply, I'm just not a news guy. I don't follow the news. It's just not my thing. I don't pay attention to it. I never saw that story. I didn't connect myself to it.
He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't have friends.
I know.
Who talk about that.
They would have had to say something like, think about it. If they say, and they want to talk to this guy on a motorcycle or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, it wouldn't even take that for me.
I know.
If I heard that, 5 people were murdered.
You're right.
And you're there. Think a park nearby.
I know.
By a few miles from where we live or whatever.
Yeah.
You're kidding. I didn't hear about that. What day?
I know.
2 weeks ago on Saturday. Oh my God, I drove right back there. What? You would
think.
Do a little digging and go to the police myself.
So, and it was in Lyon. It was not far away. I'm sure it was huge news in Lyon. It's baffling. It really is.
I guess there are people, maybe he's a hermit. Maybe he doesn't have.
No, he wasn't. It turns out, and that's really what got him off. He was just an absolutely normal middle-aged husband and father and a very respectable businessman back in Lyon. He had no dark past. He had no criminals. He had zero connection to al-Hilli. He had zero connection to Molliere. He had no connection previously to Lake Annecy other than paragliding.
Yeah.
This unnamed Lyonnais businessman was, as all the other suspects, pretty quickly out of the frame.
Yeah. Just an oblivious guy.
Yeah, exactly. And are just, not less in his defense. It could have been that, no, he did know and he just didn't feel like getting involved. Possibly.
A lot of people would be that way.
They've never named him. Mm-hmm. So some people start to think maybe it's something darker that led to the Annecy killings. And so again, we go back to the satellite stuff and they find out they knew that al-Hilli was traveling with a bunch of documents and his laptop on this seeming kind of carefree caravanning vacation. So they went back to, was there something going on? Is he selling secrets? Is he passing secrets? Is there an Iraqi connection? Because remember, his father was supposedly connected to Saddam, and rumors were that he had been Saddam's money launderer in a way.
Yeah.
And then other people, remember? Their passports were missing. They never found the passports. So they're thinking, does that lead us to believe there's some kind of international shenanigans? Or maybe was the killer told to get their passports as proof of murder or something like that? And they didn't know. Saad's employers, though, informed the French police that no part of his work was any kind of secretive thing whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, he wasn't even an employee of them. He was a freelance contract engineer. He was very highly valued and very good, and he made good money. But nothing he did was anything like top secret, and they swore he would never have access to anything top secret that was worth selling to, Middle Eastern middlemen or something like that.
Yeah.
The documents he had with him, those are the banking documents that he's going to take for that meeting he had with the Geneva bank representative to talk about his father's finances. So they were part of the financial squabbles with his brother, but nothing to do with any kind of secrets for sale. The Saddam Hussein angle, that took a little longer to track down. But, Saddam, I guess he stole like 600 million pounds from the Iraqi central bank and deposited in 2006 or something like that, and deposited all over the world. And he had used Iraqi nationals in other parts of Europe to do this for him. So they thought maybe his dad was one of those.
Yeah.
But it turns out Qadim al-Hilli was for sure not one of those, because he was actually an enemy of Saddam Hussein. In fact, they fled Iraq, and he fled Iraq with his family to get out from the potentially, bad things that happened to Saddam Hussein's enemy at the time. So it was quite the opposite. There was no connection with Saddam that they could find. In fact, if anything, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
He did have all that money in Swiss, so you maybe Qadim was a tax cheat.
Yeah.
But he wasn't some kind of international Saddam associate who, and that angle couldn't have led to the murder of his son, and his son's family.
Okay.
So about 18 months after the murders, investigators did decide to re-examine the clothes. For some reason, the clothes that the victims had on, they'd just been sitting there in the lab for all this time.
Yeah.
So a lab worker decides to, I don't know, they're going to process him or something like that. And this forensic investigator, just reaches his hand into the jacket pocket of Saad's jacket, his sports coat. And guess what he finds? He finds the two passports for he and his wife. They had been sitting there the entire time in the jacket of Saad al-Hilli, both of them. So that was quite the crushing blow for the French investigators. It made them look very incompetent, and a lot of people losing faith in their investigation. That's where we'll end now.
Okay.
There is this whole side story that a lot of people follow in this that's interesting, because it turns out they try to contact Iqbal al-Hilli's ex-husband. His name is Jimmy Thompson.
Yeah.
And he died the exact same day of the murders, September 5th, 2012. And it's what's going on? But they looked into that. Absolutely not. He was not murdered. He was in very poor health. He was 20 years her senior. And they actually ended the relationship as friends. And, he wished her well.
Yeah.
And like that. But it's that can't be a coincidence. Yeah. Actually, it can.
Yes.
That's why we have the word coincidence. And that's exactly what it was. So I'm not going to, that's, I'll go into there. But next time we'll start piecing together. There's going to be some other evidence that's going to come up.
Okay.
That's going to lead us to what I think is the right answer and the most likely answer. And that's where we'll end it next time.
Okay. Stay tuned.
Thanks for listening.